Okay, this is Erin Somerville at McCallum High School going over incumbency. So today, what you're really doing is two activities about incumbency. So you're going to need in front of you your reading packet because we're going to do this article, Why We Hate Congress But Love Our Members of Congress. We're going to look at lots of data that's in this assignment. And then after that, we're going to look at California's proposition, Prop 164, about term limits. So those two readings you should have by you. And what we're going over is incumbency. You can tell your notes incumbency. And I have a few basic vocabulary terms before we get into it. Incumbent, that is the person running for office that already has the job. So this is the one running for re-election. So in the presidential election of 2012, Barack Obama, current president of the United States, was the incumbent. And the challenger, the person running to take that spot, was Mitt Romney. So if a person holding an office with no term limits, or there's more time for them to have another term, if they want to run for re-election, we call them the incumbent. The title of today, incumbency, is referring to the really high rate of incumbency, meaning that incumbents are more likely to win than their challengers. And what about those races where there is no incumbent? The incumbent has retired, passed away, moved to a different job, whatever, is not running. Well, then it's an open race. Okay, so what you're doing in this activity is some number crunching. It's not complicated math, it's more tedious math. But you are given data for every district. So there's 435 districts that elect the 435 representatives in Congress. And this is from the 2000 election. You can see for districts 1 through 7 who won from each district and their party. And then you can see if they were the incumbent or the challenger, and the percent of vote that they won with. So District 1 elected Callahan, a Republican, who was previously in that office, so already a representative for District 1, ran again and won again with 92% of the vote. Arizona, District 1, Flake, the Republican, won. It was an open race, and he or she, I actually don't know, he or she won with 54% of the vote. So you're going to go through, I recommend, as you go through the pages of data, that you keep tallies at the top or the bottom of each page, so that way you don't struggle if you lose count. And you just want to go through carefully. I recommend a few pen colors to sort through this. You are answering these questions. According to the table, what percentage of incumbents in the House was reelected? So go through and see how many times the word incumbent is written, and divide it by the number of elections. So you'll notice you're going to be counting a lot of incumbent. You could also opt to count the open and challengers and do some subtraction to save you from all that counting. The next thing you're doing is you're looking at when those incumbents won, what percentage of them won by a landslide of 60% or more of the vote, and then find me the average winning percent in open races. After you do that, you should be able to do number 2. So pause this while you work on that. Okay, after you've done that, your math could be anywhere from, I don't know, 5% up or down, as long as it's pretty close. What you're doing is you're now comparing how this worked in the Senate. The incumbency in the Senate versus what you just number crunched, the incumbency in the House. So 26 of the senators that ran for re-election, there were 34 up for election. Remember, 2/3 of the Senate remains the same in any given election. 26 of those 34 ran for re-election. So there were 26 incumbents in 2000 in the Senate. 76% of them won. How does that rate compare with the comparable rate in the House election? And so given the number you have for 1A, you should see that here it is less. So there's a lower rate of incumbency, but 76% is still a high rate. For B, it tells you that 16 of the 26 incumbents, that's 62%, won with 60% or more of the vote. How does that compare with the House? And this too is also lower. And finally, the average winning percentage in the open races was 53. This should also be lower than the number you got for the House. So for all of these, the number is lower, which allows us to draw some conclusions in comparing the House and the Senate. So the next thing we're doing is really taking down in our notes our conclusions from doing that math. What you should have seen is that in the House, incumbents win approximately 90% of the time, and they win by a lot. And open races in the House are more competitive. So if there's an incumbent there, it's usually not so competitive. But if it's an open race, it is more competitive. This should be a shocking number. This should make you question how effective our democracy is. Question 2 in the packet asked about the dearth of competition, meaning the lack of competition. If politicians aren't really competing for votes, are they going to deliver to us their promises and good policy? And do we, the voters, show up to cast our ballots? All right, in the Senate, incumbents win less often than House incumbents, but they still win often, 76%. And Senate incumbents don't win by as much when they do win. Even open races are more competitive in the Senate. So overall, when you're comparing elections between the two chambers, incumbents have a huge advantage in both, but the Senate is the more competitive chamber, and that might fit in with your background knowledge about the Senate being the more elite chamber. So the question is, why is the Senate more competitive? Well, it only has 100 people, so it is, being the smaller chamber, the candidates themselves are more visible. It also, if you're a senator, you had to win a statewide election, so you generally have a bigger constituency to please, and that can make it more competitive as each candidate has to appeal to a broad, diverse, less homogeneous population. And the House also has safe districts, so there might be some gerrymandered districts that protect incumbents in those elections. So the final topic we discussed in class is really just, why do incumbents win? And I'd like you to pause this and brainstorm as many as you can. So try to get a list of maybe 4 or 5 reasons, and then I'll show you our list. So pause. Give yourself a chance to discover that you already have some good hunches as to why incumbents win. Okay, so here's the list we came up with. Incumbents have experience, they have name recognition, meaning that people know them. So for example, I showed this again in my course. This is my Senator, Kirk Watson. He mails this out because he can mail things out to his constituents. He is my Texas state senator. And so he connects with the people that he represents. He can tell me all sorts of good things that has happened under his watch, maybe some bills that he worked on. And I know this name now. I know this face. And people are more likely to cast a ballot in favor of the name they recognize than the name they don't. Now, because incumbents win more, this is the snowball one, because incumbents win more, they're more likely to get campaign contributions. So if you are donating money to a campaign because you want a politician's ear, you want to donate to the one who's going to win. You don't put your money on the candidate that's probably going to lose, because that is essentially money down the toilet. Also, the incumbent can claim credit. And that goes hand in hand with experience. But they can show you that they've done casework and pork barrel legislation that's already benefited the constituency, whereas the challenger can't really claim either of these. The challenger can't say, when I was a senator, because they have not been a senator yet. Also, incumbents deliver us policy. Maybe we know their policy, we like their policy. At least for the House, gerrymandering might ensure an incumbent's win. The franking privilege, that is free mail, meaning that because a senator or a representative needs to communicate with his or her constituents, he or she might mail things to the constituents. Now, none of that stuff that's mailed should be an advertisement for election, but certainly it is an advertisement for your current senator or your current representative. And then this is another one, support from the party. Generally, if you're the incumbent, your own political party doesn't seek to remove you for a different person from that party. So if you are, let's say, John Cornyn in 2014. John Cornyn is the Texas U.S. Senator, and so he's our senior senator. And in 2014, he was up for re-election. But the Republican Party of Texas didn't say, you know what, John Cornyn, we're kind of tired of your policy, we're going to pick a new Republican. So generally, the incumbents are going to have the support from their party. It's a rare instance. It would demonstrate some major divisions within a party to have a party back away from its current incumbent and go to sort of a new face. You don't want to give up the incumbency advantage. Okay, So after we did that, the next thing we did was we looked at Prop 164. Prop 164 is a statewide proposition. All propositions are state or local. There's nothing in the Constitution that allows for this kind of direct democracy. But with a state proposition, the voters actually get to go vote yes or no to a law. This would be direct democracy. And Prop 164 was about placing term limits on California's United States Congress members. So you're going to read the arguments in favor and against, and then rebuttals to both of those. What you should do at the end is have a clear idea of 3 really good arguments for the proposition, really good arguments against the proposition, and briefly which way you would have voted if you were in California at that time. Okay, that's what we covered. You should have those done next, and yeah, that's it. That is incumbency.